Hello, I'm Nick.
Hey, I'm Ed.
We're just down in the south of New Zealand, and tomorrow we're going to head off on the Dusky track in Fiordland National Park.
Should be about 6 or 7 days of hiking through the New Zealand wilderness, and we're going to take a camera to document our trip.
This was a last minute plan, and I wanted to do something over the Christmas break, but I didn't have anybody to go with, and at the last minute Ed became available.
The Dusky track is billed by some as the hardest tramp in New Zealand, stretching over 85 kilometres and 115 kilometres if you do the full detour to Supper Cove.
Wilderness now. Plenty and plenty of sandflies about.
We took a 45-minute boat across Lake Karoko to the most remote part of Fiordland either of us had ever been to. The only means of rescue during the trip would be using a personal locator beacon. Given the last-minute nature of the trip, neither of us had done much preparation at all, and so we were heading into the trip blind.
At the end of the day, we knew that the trek was maintained by Doc, so neither of us were too worried about our lack of planning. However, we soon realised it wouldn't be as easy as we imagined, as we managed to lose the track within the first 100 metres of getting off the boat. So we just made it to Halfway Hut. It's taken us about 5.5 hours to get here.
Just made it to Lake Roe. Feeling pretty spent.
Just looking through the hut book made us realise how lucky we were with the weather.
Due to the remote nature of the track, it is not recommended to hike it alone. Another tramper, a Lithuanian called Alfredus, joined us for our trip.
The views across the Pleasant Range were stunning, and it was a welcome break after travelling through the hot and humid rainforest.
We were beginning to worry about an upcoming crossing of the Seaforth River, with a bridge that had recently been washed out, potentially meaning we were going to have to swim across the river to get to the hut for the night. Luckily, there had been little rain over the previous few days, meaning only a knee-deep crossing was required. We've reached Loch Marie. We're now in Sandfly Central.
Sandflies inside the hut, so we're just about to head off to Supper Cove, quick overnight there, and then a big day tomorrow, so we never have to stay here ever again. The detour to Supper Cove was the highlight of the trip for us. This section of bush was a lot thicker, and we even found ourselves walking 1 kilometre in the wrong direction without realising it after temporarily losing our bearings. Supper Cove would mark the halfway point of the trip. We had deliberately been taking it easy so far, as we knew it would be covering 2 days' distance the following day to total 26k. This was because there was a low pressure system coming in, and floods would potentially cause us delays, which we knew we didn't have the food to sit out.
Whilst at Loch Marie Hut, we had acquired the tide times to ensure we could cross the tidal flats and avoid using the arduous high tide track which we had been warned against in the hut book at Loch Marie. Unfortunately, we had walked too fast and found ourselves with some deep channels still to cross. What do you lads reckon then? It's like just there.
We found ourselves in water that was too deep to cross, so we beelined back to the land to do a short section of bush before returning to the beach for the final section towards the hut.
Shit, that was well worth it. That looks so cool.
And here we were, the halfway point of the trip, Supper Cove. Perched on the edge of the water of Dusky Sound. A truly spectacular place given the feeling of being on the edge of the world. A feeling of real isolation.
We set our alarms for early the next morning to ensure we were crossing the flats at low tide. We also wanted to make sure we had enough daylight because we had a really long day ahead of us.
So we're just at Loch Marie Hut.
Yeah, so it's just started to rain a bit, and we are heading off to Kintail Hut, which is 11k from here, and the board says 6 to 8 hours.
Progress was slow on the track, often only moving about 2k an hour. We knew daylight was running out and we wanted to get to the hut before dark, so we jumped into the riverbed to walk along there. We could only do this because the river was low, but this allowed us to save some time.
This was the first proper rain we'd had on the trip, and it showed true Fiordland at its finest. Atmospheric clouds clinging to the forested mountains around us. It was a cold, damp night in Kintail Hut, with no dry firewood for lighting a fire, and damp clothes from the wet, muddy day before. It was a bleak scene.
So just hit a tree quite badly.
Although the track is maintained by Doc, it's still pretty gnarly, with fallen trees and branches sticking out. You have to constantly look where you're going. Not keeping an eye out for 2 seconds is sure to result in a twisted ankle or a branch in the eye.
It was a steep, tough climb over Centre Pass, and with the weather coming in, we were worried about the rain hampering our progress. Despite the wet weather, we forged on.
It was a slow, wet walk as we descended down to Upper Spey Hut, where we'd spend the night before heading out off the track the following day.
That was wet. It was our final night on the track, and so we were treated to a warm fire at the hut where we could dry our soaking wet clothes.
The prolonged heavy rain overnight had begun to saturate the ground. This was more like the Fiordland we'd been expecting.
Although we were on the home straight, the track still had a sting in its tail, with flooded sections and deep muddy bog still to cross.
Here we are! And just like that, it was all over. We'd made it to the end of the track, an adventure with zero planning, successfully completed.